Hello and welcome to this tutorial. We're going to show you how to convert from XML to HL7. I have the sample files here. There's an XML file and the HL7 file that we're going to convert it into. I'll include a link to these if you want to download these for yourself and follow along. Both files have a similar hierarchical structure, but they're not related formats. The bad news is that there's not an automagical conversion between the two. We're going to need to map them together. I'm going to show you how to create an automated conversion, so all you need to do is drop an XML file into a directory and it spits out an HL7 file. This is going to be very easy because we're using HL7 Soup's integration host. Follow along, there is a 30-day free trial, or if you're training or teaching or just want to have a play, there's also a free development license available. So here is integration host. This main screen is the dashboard used to monitor your conversions, but before we first need to create a conversion. So we just right click on the left hand panel and select new to load up the workflow designer and define our conversion. There's so much you can do with the workflow designer that goes well beyond the scope of this video. You can connect all sorts of medical hardware, software together, TCP, web services, databases, all that sort of stuff. If you'd like to know more, then take a look at our Getting Started tutorials using the link on the top right of this video. But now we're just going to dive right in. So to start with, I'm going to have to define how to receive my XML message, and I'm going to select to go for a directory scanner. I want to pick it up as a file. I'll call it get XML file. And I'd have already a directory that I want to get the data from. It's the C XML to HL7 example. So I will set that as the directory to scan for our XML files. And we're going to be looking for XML files. So I'll change the file filter. I'll leave the setting keep waiting for more files to be added on because we want this to be a permanently running process. And in my case, I'm just going to delete the file once we're finished processing, but I could move it elsewhere if I wanted to. And now we're setting the inbound message type to be an XML message. And finally, we just wanted to include that XML message into the message template. And you can see up on the right now, it gets the structure from that message, so very helpful when we're mapping the two together. Okay, so now we've defined where we get the data from. We need to add another step into our workflow, and I'm going to write it out as a file, and I'll name it appropriately. And now I just need to state how I'm going to write it out. So I'm going to use that same directory I used before, and I've got an out directory inside of that, so that's where I want it. In this example, I want to create a new HL7 file for every XML message that comes into the system. So I need to give it a file name, like so, and now I can just insert into this a variable called the workflow instance ID, and that's just a rolling code that increments with each message. That will make sure that each of the files has a unique file name. I therefore want to set the maximum records per file to 1, so it creates one message per file. And now what I'm going to do is just add in my HL7 file as the message template. This is just one message I actually took from the HL7 Soup samples. There's a whole lot of different HL7 message types that if you want to base yours on those, great. Otherwise, if you can get your actual HL7 message type, that's probably going to be the easiest thing. If you don't know your way around HL7 messages, make sure you have a look at some of my other tutorials where we go through the basics of using HL7 and load up the HL7 Soup editor. It's a great help in navigating these files. But if you look at the basics of my message, we've got our standard message header, we've got some patient information, and we've got some results information here as well. We need to map in these XML values, and as you can see, there's just a little bit of patient information, and we've got some repeated result values as well. So all we need to do is drag in the appropriate fields from the XML message into the HL7 message. Let me show you how that's done. So I'd like the patient ID to be dragged here, so I'm just going to drag that field in from that structure created from the XML message, and it automatically creates a variable. So the idea is we're creating these locations inside the message that are going to be swapped out at runtime. Whatever other values are in the message template will just be left there at runtime. So for instance, all the sending application facility details, we're just going to hard code that into the message template. So let's bring in some more of these values. The first name, So notice as I move the mouse over the message, I can see exactly where I am in the message, so I know where to drop the bindings. It's my first name, last name, and the date of birth into the appropriate location. I don't actually have gender on this one, so I'm going to remove that field. And I don't have another ID. In fact, I'm just going to repeat this ID into that field. Great. And for now, I'm just going to remove all of these OBX values. We don't have a one-to-one mapping here, so we're going to have to generate an OBX value for each instance. So I'm just going to remove all this additional stuff to simplify it for this demonstration. What else would need to be done? We'd probably want to change the date time of the message, so let's insert a variable. We'll insert the current date time, and we're just going to format that as well. So we right click, format dates and numbers, and we're going to format it as an HL7 date, and I want to include the time up to the seconds. Message type is correct, and the message control ID, we're going to insert the variable for that as well. That's our workflow instance ID. That's just our incrementing the value, so each message will have a unique ID. And all the other stuff, the version number, that's all great. I'm happy to keep that. Okay, so that was super simple. If all you have is a conversion with a one-to-one mapping, then that's all you need to do. You'd be pretty much up and running. In this example, we have got a repeating value, so I'll just quickly go over the requirements for doing that. We have multiple results. So what we need to do is loop over those results and add in a new OBX value for each one of them. So how do we do that? Well, we need to go into the transformers section of this activity. Transformers represents the mappings from one system to the other. As we dropped in the bindings into the message earlier, it was actually creating variables in the background for us. We equally could have bound the message by dragging the items from the source into the destination. Our Getting Started tutorial goes into this in a lot more detail, so I'm going to skip it for now, and I'm just going to show you how we're going to loop over the results. So we want to add a new transformer step after this one. So I right click into the transformers list, and I'm going to choose a for each. That allows us to loop over something. Now we just need to configure what that is. I want to loop over all of these result values. So all I need to do is drag the first value into there, and now we've said we want to loop over every result in this message. And now I'm going to take all the values out of each result and put them into variables so I can use those in the message. And all I did there was drag the value into the transformers list and it created it as a variable. And so now for each of those results, I'm going to append a segment into my message. And we want the source path to be the value of the OBX message. And I can literally type in that segment now, OBX, pipe. And at this point I can start inserting the variables that I've used. So I'll insert my device here, and a couple more pipes for the OBX5, and insert the value and the observation. And finally, I'll just make sure that's inside my for each. Great, so as you can see, we're creating a whole lot of variables, where we're then looping over the results, creating variables for each of the result values, and then appending into the HL7 message an OBX value for each one of the results. So that's our workflow created. Let's give it a nice name. Convert XML to HL7. I'll save and close this workflow. And if we take a look at the integration host, we now have the workflow sitting there and it's in a running state. So let's give this a try. I'll go back to this directory and I'm going to take my sample XML message and copy that, hit up the directory and place it into the directory that's been monitored. And we see it's deleted out afterwards. And if I now go to the out directory, we can see our created HL7 message with its unique file name. And if I double click on that and take a look, and we can see, sure enough, here's our generated HL7 message. It's got the correct date. All those details are correct. The patient has been brought across. Oh, there's the wrong format for the patient's birth date, but it has at least brought the value in. We'll fix that in a second. And here's each of our results, and they've gone in as we defined. So that was really simple. Let me just quickly fix up that workflow. I can now edit the workflow pattern by double clicking, and we'll head back to where it was written. This is a really simple fix. I just need to right click on the patient's date of birth, change the formatting. For a date of birth, we want that to be an HL7 date. Save and close, and this is a chance to run it again. I can go back to my directory and paste in another file. And if we go back to the out directory, we'll see the new message has been created. Double click, and great, the data is now in the correct format. Also worth noting, there's the logs that have been generated for each instance, and we can view inside those. We can actually have a look at the details of all the messages we created. If we have any debugging that we need to do, this is a great place to do it. If this video has helped you, then why not return the favour, give us a like, and maybe let us know in the comments what future videos you'd like us to produce. Of course, click the subscribe button, and maybe even ring the bell. Don't forget to take a look at our Integration Host Getting Started tutorials if you'd like to know more about transformers and how you can use Integration Host.